My name is Sean Hosein.
I'm Tim McCaskell.
I'm Michael Bailey.
My name is Mykhalovskiy.
My name is Darien Taylor.
In the 80s, I used to do the international news for the Body Politic. So that involved reading all of the American lesbian and gay papers once a month to produce kind of a compilation of stories. And I started hearing these stories about this strange new illness that was supposed to be affecting gay men.
Il y avait beaucoup de stigmatisation dans la société et aussi dans la communauté gay.
Part of the problematic was getting to a good doctor that knew about HIV. And I went through a couple of doctors that didn't know about HIV before I got to that. And they said, absolutely ridiculous stuff of, I can remember one said, well, make sure in your washroom you leave a can of Lysol so you can spray down the toilet every time you use it.
Generally, public health didn't want this to spread to the general population. And in fact, if you listen to Alistair Clayton, who was the head of the Federal Center for AIDS, one of the earliest organizations, in '89, talked at the International AIDS Conference about Canada's strategy for combating AIDS, and it was to isolate the reservoir of infection and let the infection burn out, and then AIDS would be solved. As more treatments became available and as we won the fight to get the EDRP open, we realized that we had to do a better job of getting out information to people.
I had friends who came down with AIDS, what we would now call AIDS-related complications. They knew I was doing secondary research in the reference library at the university. And before meeting with their doctors to deal with certain complications, they'd say, can you look up so-and-so for me, this condition, and find out what you can and prepare a dossier, because my doctor and I have a meeting and we need to go over options, and he would appreciate it as well as I. So I said, sure.
One of the original people around treatment uptake was Sean Hosein, who was sort of a self-taught researcher, and he began to collect all the information he could from anywhere he could.
So I started to put it together in my uncle's basement because it was done on a totally volunteer basis by myself.
Within a year, we managed to spin the Treatment Information Exchange into a parallel organization that was disconnected from AIDS Action Now, that could apply for funding and could begin to do this job much better. And that was the Community AIDS Treatment Information Exchange, or CATIE.
I was hired to basically set this up. It was for some time, AIDS Action Now had a treatment committees of various sorts that were working on access to treatments. And out of that experience, there was a move on the part of AIDS Action Now to secure funding to set up the TIE project.
CATIE was definitely created in response, like as a way to kind of sort through that anecdotal information that people with HIV were trading sort of amongst one another at the time.
And then the phone was installed. And once the phone installed, then things changed because people started calling and asking questions. What's going on? What can I be using? What do you think about this treatment? What do you think about, have you heard about, Ayurvedic medicine and what can be done there. A lot of stuff around complementary approaches, because this was a moment when biomedicine had not yet consolidated a really successful strategy for addressing HIV. So a lot of questions. And as soon as that started to happen, then we had to respond. We had to start to deal with people's needs around information.
Ma mère m'a contacté, elle a dit qu'il y a un organisme à Toronto qui donne de l'information parce qu'il n'y avait pas beaucoup d'informations. Et cet organisme, c'était CATIE. Et à l'époque, ils avaient un service téléphonique, comme on a toujours maintenant, mais c'était avant l'Internet. Alors, elle a reçu comme une enveloppe aussi épais comme ça, des photocopies.
There's still people with HIV living today who tell me things like, treatment update saved my life. And I go, really? Wow. And I've met people who said that.
I mean, we did such amazing things with plain language, right? And our ability to communicate to people who didn't have a science background.
There was an extraordinary period of experimentation, of social, organizational, political experimentation that was led by people living with HIV that resulted in CATIE. And to recognize and understand that, I think, is really important.